and welcome everybody. My name is Oliver Guirdham from the Business Research Company, and we're doing a presentation today called Decoding Volatility: How Market Intelligence helps businesses thrive amid trade wars, tariff shifts, and global disruption. So really, we're the purpose of the discussion is to look um, at the impact of the tariff and trade wars that have come up recently on what people should be doing in their market intelligence. And today we're going to focus specifically on supply chain intelligence, which is one of the aspects, perhaps the aspect that is most directly affected by the new tariffs, because that's where many companies are needing to look at their supply chains again, maybe change suppliers, maybe diversify suppliers, maybe change their relationship with suppliers, maybe look for suppliers in different geographies, etc. And we're finding that we're getting interest from a lot of our clients and prospective clients in getting help with that process with supplier intelligence. So we want to talk a bit about that and what kind of research companies can and should be doing, and yes, and what the key factors are there to consider. Next slide, please. So there are kind of three types of impact from supply from the trade wars. I'll talk a bit more specifically about what I mean about the tariffs and trade wars, though I think most people are probably pretty familiar with it. There are strategic consequences, operational consequences, and ecosystem consequences. So when we talk about strategic consequences, we're really talking particularly about market consequences. So where companies are having to look for new markets for their products because they are finding that in some of their existing markets, they're facing barriers to entry, tariffs, controls, etc. Then there are operational consequences, which are so that's really where we're talking about the supply chain, where they're needing to look to different suppliers to build their products and services or supply their products and services. And then there's the broader impact on the general business ecosystem, and that's looking more broadly at the situation, and their strategy. So things like should we still be operating in the same way as we were before? Does our business make sense now in this new environment? Should we be looking at different markets? Should we be doing things in a different way? So those kind of broader considerations where you need to reassess the whole approach. That's what we cover there. But today we're really focusing particularly on the more operational side, which is looking to strengthen and improve your supply chain in the light of the current tariff situation. Thank you. Next slide. So yes, talking about that in a little bit more detail. So impact. So I'll start off with the operational. So rewriting your sourcing strategies to favor resilience, and to some extent over lower costs. I think the global picture has been the story of maybe the last 15, 20 years, perhaps prior to COVID, was that companies, was a story of globalization, mass sourcing from all over the world, etc. Improved transport, improved communications, allowing for that approach. With these changes and other changes, that there's been some reversal of that, and looking towards local suppliers, looking towards suppliers in different countries, having to have a broader range of suppliers than previously. Strategic consequences in terms of markets that you focus on, identifying safe zone markets which are insulated from the disruption, fast tracking services which aren't affected by tariffs, services generally aren't affected by the tariffs, and again, supply chain resilience. And then on the ecosystem overall, so tariffs can make the whole business classes unprofitable, or highly risky, or having a lack of clarity that doesn't allow for investment and planning. There can be situations where you can't get the raw materials that you need, dependency on politically unstable zones, problems with routing materials. So there are a number of companies, I think, in the US that have already just shut up shop, particularly sort of import and export businesses dealing almost entirely with China, or some businesses which only really import Chinese goods, sort of fairly, I think typically fairly low cost things like party goods and that kind of thing, some decorations, those kind of things that have just simply it's just not workable in a situation where the tariffs are what they are, and some companies have stopped working already. There are stories of companies that had big orders in ships that were arriving in the US, that they simply weren't able to pay for because the tariffs were more than the goods that were in the ships. So in those kind of circumstances, so those are extreme examples. But it's not just a matter of improving your supply chains and looking for new markets. In some cases, it's also a matter of reviewing the overall business and how it should work. Yeah. Next slide, please. So I think if we look back at try and see this in the bigger view, I think we can go back to the existing trade environment. This largely liberalized, fairly low tariff environment, changed a bit in 2016 with Trump's first term and the first set of tariffs that were placed on China. But broadly speaking, I think you can talk about a post Second World War consensus. So going back to the 1950s, where we've lived in a fairly low friction, low tariff environment, and that has been one of the major drivers of an ongoing economic boom. Definitely more in some places than others. Definitely not perfect and not continuous, but generally speaking, it's been, I think most economists agree, it's been a big driver of growth and of globalization, of new countries coming into the global economy, and that's been driven by much more complex and integrated supply chains, and much better supply chain management. Technology has come to play a much bigger role in supply chains. People have been able to look at a much broader range of options for their supply chains. And then, yes, the growth of certain highly export-driven economies like Germany, and particularly China and other parts of Southeast Asia. generally the tariffs have been low, led by the US, which is the world's biggest market at about 1.5%. But with some exceptions, generally tariffs have been historically low in that period, and that's been the background to the kind of global economic expansion, and some people would argue, relative peace of the post Second World War period. And then yes, there have been organisations that play a critical role in that, supporting that and helping resolve disputes as they come up, so that they don't tend to escalate to the kind of levels that we've seen more recently. All that changed a little bit on 2nd of April with Liberation Day. So these very so we yeah, so very strong changes. I think, is this the sort of intermediary slide, Soumya? So yeah, there was some tariffs started to be implemented sooner, but then yeah, on Liberation Day we saw these very high tariffs of 145% on China. There were already some tariffs from the start of Trump's new administration on Canada and Mexico, which shouldn't be underestimated. They're very significant as well, and they're some of the biggest trading partners for the US. But the focus has been particularly on the China tariffs, which are really at a level which are unsustainable for doing business at 145% in one direction. China and other countries have reciprocated. And yeah, it's a major sort of supply shock. There was a dramatic drop in financial markets, a spike in the yields of American bonds, so a drop in the value of American bonds. Yeah, an extreme reaction to a fairly extreme policy. Next slide. Things have pulled back a bit from there. So we've seen temporary settlements with China, some starting of some deals with places like the UK. The main body of reciprocal tariffs across 60 or more countries, 180 countries or something, has been postponed by 90 days. And I don't think anyone expects it, or most people don't expect it to come back in quite the same level. But I think the critical thing is that it's still a very different environment than it was pre Trump's second term, pre-Liberation Day. And there are significant tariffs in place. Those are likely to continue. It is part of the stated policy of the US government. There will be reciprocal tariffs from other countries, and therefore the overall environment has changed, and the predictability and stability of the trade environment has changed. There's also the potential that, a kind of Rubicon has been crossed, and other countries there'll be more trade tensions between different countries, not just between the US and others, going forward as this becomes a kind of normalized means of competition and potentially to some extent aggression between different countries. So I don't think anyone is expecting a return to complete normalcy in a short term, which means enterprises need to really be thinking about how they deal with the new environment. So the business research company can help with this. They can identify markets to focus on. They can help you track all the tariff implications and all the latest changes. and they can help you to evaluate supplier ecosystems um, to choose the correct supplier, and that's what we're going to particularly talk about today. Next slide. So now we're going to move on to supplier diversification or supplier intelligence. So um, this is yeah. So how does the business research company help you to diversify your supply chain? Um, so we've done a lot of projects of this type, and they generally fall into a range of types or a range of stages. The first one is helping you to identify what it is that you're looking for from your suppliers. So helping you to create a wish list. That can include a huge range of things, but price, cost, location, financial stability, capability, of course, different types of capability, etc., ESG track record, regulatory compliance, pricing structure, and help you to break up that wish list into the nice to haves and the need to haves. So companies, areas like ESG to some extent, but not necessarily. ESG may be a must have. ESG may be some aspects of ESG may be nice to have. Definitely sort of tech forward integration, AI integration, Internet of Things tracking, etc. These are some of the criteria that RIFID. These are some of the criteria that a lot of consumers or procurers of goods are looking for in their suppliers, and they may be a nice to have or a must have. Increasingly in this environment, diversification is important. So that can be a matter of having more suppliers, having a balance between very large multinationals and agile SMEs supplying you for any particular product. It may be geographic spread, and yeah, reducing single point dependencies in competent chains, component chains. So one of the trends of recent years has been these the move towards more in-depth, close relationships with suppliers, where where companies have looked to get very close to their suppliers, sometimes even invest in them, share some of their risks, train some of their people, etc., to improve the smoothness of the relationship and the quality of the final output. But of course, if you're making all those investments, it makes you less nimble about being able to change your suppliers when things change, and it also makes it harder to have a diversified supplier list because you can't really make that kind of investment in multiple different companies for the same component. Many companies are are using suppliers for an enormous number of different components, so the complexity then becomes very great. So having diversity and managing a broader range of suppliers is something that becomes more important again. And yes, understanding the trade-offs between high integration and a more of a transactional relationship. Did we skip a slide there or not? No. Great. So, and how do you go about finding new suppliers? So first of all, you look at the overall market. for suppliers for a particular good and do an assessment of it. So how competitive is it? How fragmented is it? How many, is it a lot of small companies? Is it single large companies? How easy is it to switch between suppliers? Um, are there environmental factors where the suppliers are based? Is there raw material scarcity for the suppliers, labor volatility for the suppliers? What is the financial situation of the supplier companies? How stable are they, etc. So an analysis of the bigger picture of the market for suppliers in a particular product or service, and then start going about discovering or finding your the suppliers who are relevant. There are a lot of number of different databases here which are available, which can supply information on companies, and that you can put in different criteria for the companies, like what size of what revenues, what type of company, where they're based, etc., to create a long list of potential suppliers. Then you start doing secondary research based on those suppliers that you've identified, looking at their reviews, ratings, their certifications. And then, and this is a critical part where we particularly get involved, is doing some primary outreach, speaking to those suppliers, asking them compliance questions, asking them questions according to the criteria that you're ranking them on, and getting that greater level of depth of understanding of each supplier. And that's something that we do a lot of, that kind of supplier benchmarking process. Another thing is is best practice, looking at what your competitors are doing, who are they partnering with, what kind of model are they adopting, are they using multi-sourcing, are they using just in time, are they using very integrated relationships, are they how do their contracts work, all of these kind of things. What tolerances do they have within their contracts? So understanding what other people are doing and what seems to be most successful. What are successful companies doing in this area? And then benchmarking. So using all these factors to benchmark the existing suppliers that your shortlist of suppliers, and benchmarking them on their key criteria before making a final decision or going into final negotiations. So what kind of factors should you be looking for when you're doing that kind of research? What are you benchmarking them on? So risk assessment, interdependencies between different suppliers. Like you might think, oh, we've got 3 different suppliers for this, but then you realize they've all got the same parent company, or they're all invested in by the same company, and it's possible that if one of them goes bust, they'll all go bust at the same time, or they're all in the same country. So the country specific, although you've got provider diversification, you don't have geographic diversification and risk mitigation. Having and ensuring that you've got and then there are various ways that you can mitigate that kind of risk that we'll perhaps come on to a little bit later. So then pricing, comparing prices from different suppliers, making sure that you're comparing apples with apples is very important here. Is the quality the same? Is the delivery timeline the same? Are there any penalties, etc.? So pricing comparison, not just the sort of top level pricing, but the details behind it. How does the contract work? How long is it? How flexible are the clauses? what are the exit terms and what are the ramp up terms. So these are important things to compare. Timing, lead times, how long does it take to get the relationship started? How long does it take to deliver? What is the variance there? On the punctuality, are there any seasonal factors that need to be considered? And then quality standards and tolerances. So this is perhaps the most important. What levels of tolerance for errors or issues are tolerated within the contract? At what point do any financial penalties kick in? What are the circumstances in which quality issues can result in you can being able to break the contract, etc. So yeah, checking that the quality and ensuring that the tolerances within the contract align with what you need for your business. So how do we help in these areas? We help them help people make faster decisions by giving this local information, this driven primarily from our secondary research, from our internal databases, from the databases we buy in, but mainly from primary research, talking to people, expert interviews, participant interviews, etc. We can through that helping you make faster decisions, shifting your investment into higher return zones, giving you the data to support strategy pivots, helping you to still look out for and find opportunities amid disruptions, finding the white spaces in demand, finding products and services that actually benefit from tariffs. So obviously that certainly exists. Pockets of opportunity exist, and certainly areas like infrastructure within the US is a potential strong growth market, for example, or second-hand vehicles in the US are currently going back gangbusters, or the shares in them are going gangbusters because people are expecting more people to buy second-hand goods as new goods become more expensive. And yes, making sure that you're one of the companies that's moving, or the entities that's moving quickly and being agile rather than one of the laggards. And to do that, it's often a good idea to bring in external help from a company like the business research company. Next slide, please. Good. So that's a quick overview of what we do in supplier intelligence. And now we're going to move on to a few case studies of some projects that we've done in supplier intelligence where we've helped some of our clients. The first one, I feel like I could perhaps give a break now. No, I'll talk through this one first, Soumya, and then we'll ask Ravi to talk through a couple of other ones that he's been involved in. We took on a project for a FMCG company, one of the largest FMCG companies in the world. And they were reviewing their facilities management strategy. So it was their global operation reviewing their facilities management strategy, deciding which facilities management provider they would use. And it's a complex, and that kind of level of business, it's a complex decision. There are a number of different factors. There are a wide range of suppliers, some of them, but only probably a small number of suppliers that have the kind of global reach to be a single integrated provider for them in all the different countries. I think this organization operated in something like 40 or 50 different countries. There aren't many facilities management outsourcing suppliers who cover all of those different numbers of countries with the level of quality and complexity that's needed. But there are thousands of suppliers, but at the more local level. But then it's a strategic decision. Do you take on one supplier for everything, even if they have to actually outsource some of the work themselves to a third party in order to get the complete coverage? Or do you keep some of it in-house, which has come back into fashion within facilities management? And how deeply integrated do you make that relationship? So we were looking at it in terms of 5 different factors, engagement models. So should you be engaging at the global level, at the regional level, or the local level, or at a combination of those, a split service level with your facilities management suppliers? What should be the basis of the relationship? So should it be based on performance related payments, or should it be more integrated where you're actually sharing some of the risks with your suppliers? So it depends how much you want it to be about kind of carrot and how much about stick in terms of how their performance. Operational models. So do you want to go single service, like use one supplier for, so there were different aspects to this, like building maintenance or machinery maintenance or cleaning, etc. Do you want to use one supplier for all of those, or do you want to maybe even at global level, you can have all of your cleaning supplied by one country and your building maintenance or your outside maintenance supplied by someone else. So these are all considerations. They've all got they all have advantages and disadvantages that we looked at. Yeah. So do you go for that very integrated facility model, or do you bundle different outsourcers together? Maturity models within the different well, let me go to financial models. There's a lot of different ways that the relationship can be set up financially. One of the key differences is between an open and closed book relationship. And so open book is more kind of well, closed book is more, we get the supplier gets on with it and charges you, and that's agreed in advance, so it's more controllable. The open book, though, you have more visibility on what's going on. You see their costs, etc., or what you're being charged for in more detail. But on the other hand, you don't have as much control and visibility in advance of in terms of what you're going to be charged. Vested relationships are these relationships with suppliers that are very close and you're working long term together in a very close way. Then there's cost plus and fixed fee, which is also related to charging. Cost plus is where is more flexible, where you can actually see what they're paying for things, and then you just pay a percentage premium on top of it. So again, a higher level of visibility. Guaranteed maximum price, so that kind of puts a cap on the overall cost of everything, etc. And these are interesting, not just because they are factors that affect facility management outsourcing, but these terms, these ideas are there in many or most outsourcing relationships. Varies a bit according to the complexity and whether they're providing a service or a good. But these are the kind of terms, these are the kind of things that need to be thought about in all of these relationships, and that we're used to dealing with from these types of projects. And then the maturity model of the contracts themselves. So generally speaking, in a first generation contract between the procurer and the supplier, you're just looking at the nuts and bolts, productivity, uptime, delivery standards. Then you tend in the ongoing generations of these relationships, or the more sophisticated contracts, you start looking at environmental factors, more social and governance factors, integrating your technology more, expecting the supplier to be coming to you with innovations more. So these are some of the factors that come into it as you go on to deeper and more complex contracts. Yeah, so we supplied. So we supplied. We're a supplier. We supplied that project, and we delivered it. It took about 6 weeks. We spoke to, I think, about 20 of no 30 people who buy these facilities management services and people who supply these facility management services. All of the top names globally, most of the big FMCG companies globally we spoke to and benchmark what they did. And so we were able to give, a real level of visibility when you talk about that kind of benchmarking and best practice. We were able to give the client a huge amount of understanding of what their competitors were doing. And which they then took into their board meeting and based their strategy for the next 5 years of their facilities management strategy on other things as well, but heavily on that piece of research. Thank you, Soumya. I'll hand over now to Ravi, who will talk through a couple of other projects that we've done in supply chain intelligence, and they'll probably be different. And so there's a whole range of different things that we can do within supply chain intelligence.
Thank you, Oliver. To start with, we conducted a supply chain analysis for a cardiovascular patches. This is one of the life science product which is used in cardiothoracic surgeries for different cardiac clinical indications. And the supply chain differs across various industry sectors. For example, for pharma and life sciences, cold chain is one of the major supply chain difference with respect to automotives, where we have high volume goods, or with respect to electronics, where it's based on third party manufacturing. So these type of cardiovascular patches, we try to analyze where these patches were manufactured, and where the companies used to get raw materials for manufacturing these patches, because some are synthetic based patches where the companies need different chemical raw materials, but some are biological based patches where the companies need to get from allograft or autografts, means grown cells from different stem cell labs. So from the suppliers of raw materials to manufacturing of the patches, and because these patches are manufactured by very few life science companies, and these patches have to be supplied to different European and US countries where there is a need. And also these patches must be supplied directly to the hospitals, specifically to the cardiothoracic surgeons when need. So we try to analyze the complete supply chain landscape from the raw material suppliers to manufacturing, and how the patches from the manufacturing locations are being supplied to different countries, or is there any need for warehousing of these patches? And because these patches need cold chain shipments, so how are the distributors, if any, are dealing with the cold chain shipments in supplying these patches from the manufacturers to and healthcare providers? What are the strategies used by these companies to effectively supply these patches across different geographies? This is one of study that we conducted, and which helped client who were developing an innovative patch, and how they have to strategize on the supply chain model, and which type of supply chain model, which type of distributor they need to connect to directly supply their patches to hospitals. Next
Yeah,
slide,
I mean, I
please.
think that's one of the
Yeah,
things
yeah,
that we often
yeah.
find with these studies is that there are one or two key questions that they just don't quite understand how something works in the supply chain, or how other companies deal with a problem that they're facing. That's often kind of one of the key drivers for one of these studies relating to supply chain. That we find where, yeah, that where they're then struggling to, where they're having their own struggles and trying to understand what other people are doing or what the best approach is.
Yes. Next slide. Yes, this is a very in-depth study that we did for more than 3 months. We have a client, an animal health client, who has developed an innovative diagnostic disease for bovine mastitis, one of the major significant disease which uh, affects uh, uh, cow, and it causes a lot of economic burden to the dairy farmers. So the client has only technology, and he has conducted pilot studies on the technology, but he do not have a manufacturing capacity to manufacture the kits on a high scale. And he wanted us to develop a complete supply chain strategy from the pilot technology that he has to supply the final produced kits to the dairy farms, to the end dairy users. So what we did is, first we tried to identify a contract manufacturer who can manufacture using the client's technology in the target countries. So across APAC, across North America, across Europe, different countries, we profiled several companies, several contract manufacturers. We did a long list of contract manufacturers and tried to assess each contract manufacturers in based on their capability and capacity to manufacture such immunochromatography based test kits. And we try to understand whether they have ISO standards, whether they have manufacturing certifications, whether they have manufacturing capacities, and finally narrowed down few contract manufacturers across all target regions and target countries who can manufacture the test kit based on the client required test kit volumes. The second step, what we did is to identify suppliers or wholesalers and distributors who can distribute the test kits from the contract manufacturers to each of the target countries. So we developed a strategy. We tried to connect to all animal health product wholesalers and distributors and try to find out who are interested to supply the test kit from, and who can integrate specifically with the contract manufacturer and then supply the test kit to the target countries. Yeah, so we identified distributors, and we try to allies the contract manufacturers with distributors and with the client who has this innovative technology. We also try to connect few uh, delivery partners who can do last mile delivery of these kits, because these kits are generally needed for dairy farmers and dairy farms, small scale and large scale dairy farms. So we developed different types of shipping models and developed a strategy so that uh, the test kits are manufactured at different locations, and then they are supplied through different distributors to different target countries across the globe. So this is a full in-depth study where we help our client who has only patented licensed technology to develop a complete test kit used by dairy farmers at his dairy farm location. And also because this involves supplying to the veterinarian clinics as well. So we try to connect to the distributors or supply partners who can distribute to both dairy farms as well as veterinary clinics. And we also help them do test runs or pilot studies. So yeah, this is one of study that we conducted to uh, develop apart from the go-to-market strategy, we developed a complete supply chain strategy from the technology to the final end product used by the dairy farmer.
Great. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. So that shows, like, that one level, one type of study, like, can be very in depth and very uh you know thinking through the whole strategy. Another one, we've done lots of projects where we're simply shortlisting a range of different distributors and maybe checking them on a preset list of criteria. So it's a much shorter studies, much more where we're just filling in one piece in that process. So we can do a range of different parts of that process to strengthen those processes and make them more objective as well. So you have a third party getting involved and helping you to get objective information rather than relying in-house, which could be affected by your own biases, etc., or by preconceived ideas or existing relationships. So having intelligence on supply chain helps you to take a step back and be objective in your choices as well.
Yes. Can you move on to next slide, please, Sonia? Uh, yeah, this is a case study where a client who has developed a LINAC radiotherapy device, but he doesn't have any sales or service business segments. So he has developed a device and a technology, and he doesn't want to pitch in, or he doesn't want to have a sales force or service force to provide the services to the end customer. So what he wanted us to do is to find other companies who are involved in the sales or supply of radiotherapy based devices, any similar radiotherapy based devices, and then help partner with our client to provide the sales and services for this specific Linac product. So what we did is we did a comprehensive long list of all companies across the globe who provide or who supply radiotherapy devices, or who do only third-party services for radiotherapy devices, and we try to benchmark such companies in terms of their sales force, in terms of their sales turnover and financials, and also we try to benchmark in terms of KPIs for service, such as turnaround time or client satisfaction, and then finally shortlisted companies who are interested, and we try to have conversations with each of the shortlisted companies and try to understand if they are interested to partner with the client, and then we arrange the meetings with our client to do further partnerships for their product in specific regions. And we also try to see that there are different partner companies in different geographies, so that they don't have much risk, and we do risk analysis as well in terms of financials of the partners and reputation of the partners.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that's coming up a lot now is that geographic scope part in different projects.
Next slide, please. Yes, this is one interesting study where a company, a biopharma company based in Japan, wanted to start its base or start its offices in US, Europe, and APAC, and it wanted us to finalize a catchment area or a good location where it can minimize its costs, and it can help strengthen its uh, administration, or help strengthen its businesses across clinical development, regulatory affairs, and business development. So specifically, client wanted us to select a location, any specific industrial cluster, which could be good for biopharma or medical ecosystem, and where the client wanted to do product development as well as clinical trial development. So what we try to understand is, first we analyzed all the biopharma companies in US, different European countries, and APAC, where they are located, which industrial clusters they are located, what are the economic benefits that these companies are availing by locating in those clusters, and are the raw material suppliers are close proximity to these industrial clusters. Second, if a company wanted to do clinical trial analysis or clinical development, or sourcing of the patients or sourcing of recruits for the clinical trials will be easy in such locations. Or if a company wanted to do regulatory studies, then coordination with different regulatory authorities, or even a specific catchment area or specific cluster is very close to other clinical research or CRO ecosystem for this company to develop the drug. So we try to uh, do analysis benchmarking various biopharma companies and medical device companies where they are located in different geographies. What is the benefits for choosing that specific location in terms of economic benefits, or in terms of operational process benefits, in terms of how is to develop a drug to do a clinical trials in such locations. And we gave a strategic advice to the client, top three locations in the US, top three locations in Europe, or top three locations in APAC, which could the client could think to establish their business operations or business which where other raw material suppliers are in close proximity, and help the companies to reduce the costs.
Yeah, and I think this is another type of research that I think is we're starting to see demand for because of relocation or where people are setting up, thinking about relocation, etc. In the current scenario. So Yeah, this is another example of the type of that we've got experience in doing these kind of studies. Ravi obviously is primarily worked, is primarily a healthcare expert, so all these examples are in healthcare, but we do lots of these kind of studies across different industries.
Yes, thank you so much, Oliver and Ravi. Now we'll move on to the next section of Q&A. Does anyone have any questions? All right, then moving on to the next section of our presentation is why understanding your market is no longer optional. Well, let's be honest, 2025 has been an year that a faint-hearted person cannot take in. And we are seeing global economies moving, they're uncertain, they're shifting, and they're shifting almost every day. And every day we wake up to a new news, and it's just not about what the market demands are anymore. It's about understanding your supply chain fragility and suppliers' uncertainty, and along with serious disruptions that are ongoing. So this kind of environment just doesn't challenge decision making, but it urges you to move towards more quantitative and qualitative data that delivers you quality insights. And here is where the business research company comes into the picture, because we believe that understanding the market is no longer optional, it is a survival strategy 101. So let's look at 2025, and let's just look at the last 6 weeks and what we have seen through. We have seen tariffs go up and down multiple times within the last 3 weeks itself. And if you look at the last 6 weeks, you know what has happened. So looking at that, and then there have been mandates and controls and then regulations where you need to understand and no more be able to just stick to the standard data that is provided to you. Next slide, please. Now, I would like to talk more about why understanding your market must go deeper than just looking at the static data that is there available to you, because you must understand that we often hear that know your market before investing in or before going ahead. And but what does that mean, or what does that really mean when the trade dynamics flip overnight and you wake up to new news every day? It means that you are no longer enough. It is no longer enough to just skim through the surface. You need to dig deeper. You need to understand the basics of your business. Why or where do you have to do things when all of the policies are shifting in, and who are the new players, and how the rules to engagement are evolving with time. And the business research company often helps you here. So we deliver relevant intelligence, not just in the form of syndicate market research reports, but also customized research. And customized research plays a key role over here, because now you need granulated, hyper granulated data, which is local towards your insights and helps you understand the changes that are more dynamic, and not just a 5-year CAGR, which is a projection and helps you understand the bigger picture, but you need to be more agile with respect to the changes that are happening within the market. Next slide, please. So let's talk about, why should we go for a tailored strategy than an off-shelf standardized, say, a syndicate market report. So this is a big question which is often asked by a lot of our clients. So we tell them that if you're looking for something that will help you at the moment and that is not going to frame your strategy, then go for a syndicated report. But if you're looking for something that is tailored for you, that is client specific, and that helps you make solutions that are provided to your clients, like the example Oliver was talking about, the FMCG brand, it was one of the biggest companies globally. So we helped that company understand how would they change their strategy. So there, a syndicated report wouldn't help them, because they need to understand different perspectives which lie throughout the geographies globally. And that's where customized research come into the play. And also, with respect to the current market situation, custom research is a solution which understands your next strategic move and gives you the solutions that are tailored to you. Next slide. Now, one would ask, how can one embed market intelligence into strategic DNA of their working? So if there's one thing that we have learned from working with global firms across more than 27 industries, it is market intelligence works best when it is an isolated report or not a once a year activity, but in an ongoing effort, and it is customized for your needs. It should be embedded on how you make your decisions, how you frame your strategy, how you market your products, or how you develop your products. It is around your executive decision planning, and it goes on with you. So at the business research company, we always help you out with detailed strategies and upcoming opportunities within your market, and we dig into the micros and the macros of the market, and we cover more than 60 geographies for you and the market that you want to work into. And we not only give you the data, but we give you strategic insights that are actionable, strategic, and can actually be used. So that's how we help our clients build their market intelligence DNA. So that's from my end. Thank you so much for attending the webinar with us, and stay tuned for the next session.
Thank you, everybody.
That
Thank you. And do get in touch at thebusinessresearch.company.com if you have any questions or if you want to hear more about our sourcing intelligence offering. Thank you. Bye-bye.